Hello, everyone. I am Sally Bohls.
And I'm Jennifer Auerbach.
We would like to welcome you today to our clinic here at TMEA 2021.
We're really excited to be here to be talking with you about oboe reeds, bassoon reeds, and how to teach reed adjusting virtually. One of the things that this pandemic has really taught us is how to be resourceful. And both Sally and I are bassoon and oboe private lesson instructors, and we teach a lot of private students, and we teach band directors at our band director boot camp. We taught a lot of people this past year how to adjust their reeds without even being there in person. And so we learned a lot of tips and tricks that we'd really like to pass along to you.
All right, so let's get right into it. Before we start with reeds, however, we want to do just a reality check for you. There are actually 3 factors that go into making a successful venture with reeds. The first, and with playing in general, the first is the student themselves. So things you want to check for the student real quick. You want to make sure that the reeds have been soaked, that they've been soaked properly for the correct amount of time, not too long, not enough, that they have their embouchure with their lips placed in the optimal place on the reed, that the student is using the right amount of air that they're taking in and the right amount of pressure behind that air that they are pushing out. Then you want to make sure that they have put their instrument together correctly. For us, it's to make sure your bridge keys are lined up. For bassoon, it's a bazillion things. And so also, as they actually start to play, are their fingers actually covering the holes on the notes as they finger them? All right, so the student carries a pretty hefty load of responsibility here. The second factor that is involved in this is the instrument itself. So I know you have budgets and all those sorts of things, but please make sure that a professional has gone over those instruments and made sure they are in adjustment before you give them to the student to play. All right, so the third thing in our reality check, we had the student themselves, we had the instrument, and now we have reeds, which will take us to our clinic.
All right, before we start talking about all the adjustments that we might be doing to reeds, it's really important to establish what are our expectations of reeds. The first thing that I want a reed to do is play in tune. It doesn't matter anything else. If it doesn't play in tune, it's not doing its job for me. So tuning. The next thing I need it to do is make the right tone, the tone that I'm looking for. Additionally, I want to make sure that I can articulate, and that has to be easy and just right. I also want to make sure that I can play in all the different ranges that I need to play in, low, middle, and high, not just one single range. The last thing is, the reed has to feel right and have flexibility. If it does all those other things, but it doesn't feel right and have the flexibility that I need, then there's something lacking in the reed.
And of course, everything that Jennifer just said applies to an oboe reed as well. So the deal with reeds is they have one main responsibility, and that is that they need to vibrate. Without vibration, we don't have sound. So the deal is with reeds, we just need to be able to control the way they vibrate. So we end up with the type of sound we like and the response we like and all the things on this list that she just said work for us. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the parts of the oboe reed and the bassoon reed. So if you'll look at the diagram that's going to be either in your handout or on the screen, you'll see there are different parts to each reed. These are characteristics that need to be in place on a reed. It doesn't matter who made the reed, whether I made the reed, Jennifer made the reed, some other oboist or bassoonist made the reed. These are simply characteristics that are required to help us control the way the reed vibrates, so we end up with the tone that we like. So with an oboe reed, if you look, you start at the top of the reed and work your way down to the string and the cork. You have the tip of the reed, then you have the heart of the reed, then you have the back of the reed or the windows of the reed or channels. They've been called several different things, but it is the back portion of the reed that is underneath the heart. Then you have the rails that go along the sides of the reed. Then you have the spine that goes down the center of the reed.
And as for the bassoon reed, we really have all these same parts. When you look at them, the bassoon reed does look a little bit different because of the way the blending is, but going from the top all the way down to the string again, just like Sally said, we have the tip of the reed, then we have the heart, we have the back, and sometimes we also have what are called the channels. but these are a little less defined than in an oboe reed. We also have the rails that are on the edges. And finally, we have the spine that goes down the very center.
All right, so now once again, if you'll reference a different diagram that is there, we're going to be talking about the responsibilities of each of those sections that we just identified. Now, we have pared this down. You see very few words on the diagram with descriptions of responsibilities. What you must understand is that we try to get this down to as few words as possible. So we can talk about this and it turns into rocket science if you're not careful. So each part of the reed has multiple responsibilities that we will talk about as we go on, even if they're not listed on this diagram. We just tried to pull out what we felt was maybe the main source of responsibility of that portion of the reed. So remember, the reed has to vibrate. If the reed doesn't vibrate, we don't have sound. All right. So, and it has to vibrate such that when we put the right kind of air behind it, with the right kind of pressure behind it, that it does exactly what we're asking it to do. So for us on the oboe reed, starting at the top again, all right, the tip is basically responsible for response. It's the thinnest part of the reed and it's responsible for the reed to initially speak. Then behind that on the heart, that is basically where your low notes and your crow live. Then if you keep on going down in those back windows or channels or the underneath the heart in those windows, then that part of the back, that is basically where your high notes live for the stability in your high notes and the way they need to vibrate. Then your rails that are along the outside of the heart and the back, that's for the holding the reed together on the sides so it doesn't leak, and it helps adjust what size opening you have depending on the thickness of the rails. Then the last thing is the spine, and in some ways that's the most important part because that's kind of the super glue that holds all the other sections together, and it is about focus.
And the bassoon reed is very similar. And so we have a lot of the same kinds of parts and they function very similarly. But because the bassoon reed is bigger, the way that those parts blend is just a little bit smoother than if you've ever observed the difference between an oboe and bassoon reed. So just like the oboe reed, the tip of the bassoon reed is responsible for the initial articulation or the response of the notes coming out. And so that's very important to know. And then the heart has the responsibility of being in charge of focus and tone, and that is another thing that is very similar to the oboe reed as well. The back tends to be where our strength is starting, and so that's where we have darkness or brightness, sort of that tone quality, and another part where strength is located. And then before I talk about the spine, I want to talk a little bit about the wires because we have 3 wires. We have the first wire that is right below where the bark starts, and then the second wire, which is right above usually where the string or the glue is, and then we usually have a third and possibly a fourth wire that's hiding underneath the string or the glue. Those first and second wires actually can affect the reed greatly. And so the first wire is often called the tuning wire, and it has like control, and it also does affect response. The second wire does also affect tuning and control, and the tip opening as well. Now the spine really, just like the oboe reed, has a lot to do with the focus of our tone and the strength of the overall part of the reed, and that spine goes all the way from the back all the way up to the tip.
So what we really want you to realize as we talk about the portions of the reeds and their responsibilities is they do have these separate portions on there, but they work together. Okay, they all work together to produce the type of vibration, controlled vibration that we want to produce the kind of sound that we like. All right, so before we really get into the nitty-gritty of what do we do to help ourselves out, we need to talk about some tools. All right, we're going to talk to you for a little bit before we get into the actual adjusting of reeds and talking about that. We're going to talk about some tools real quick. We have level 1 tools for the oboe. That would be a ceramic fingernail file.
And then for the bassoon, we're talking about a pair of needle nose pliers, about 4 to 6 inches.
All right, if we go to level 2, this is more for your intermediate rather than beginning level student. The tool that I would add on to the ceramic file is a single edge razor blade.
And then for the bassoon, we're talking about a pair of sharp scissors. This can be cutter bee scissors or regular scissors that you have in your general school supplies.
And then we have level 3 tools, which is a little more for your advanced student, getting a little more into the nitty-gritty of adjusting things. And for the oboe, that would be a plaque. Then we have a cutting block. And the third thing, of course, would be a very good reed finishing knife.
And then for the bassoon, our level 3 tools are going to be also a plaque. Just like for the oboe, we put that in the middle of the blades. And then we're also talking about sandpaper. For me, I prefer 220 grit wet dry sandpaper. And we also use the same kind of reed knife. It's a specialized reed knife that you get from a double reed specialty store.
All right, there's all sorts of tools. These are just the main ones we've talked about. So let us get into some reed fundamentals. All right, so now we're going to be talking about some fundamental aspects of the reeds themselves that we need to be able to check so we know what we're going to be doing when we're adjusting. One of the main things for us is the pitch of the reed, how to check the pitch of the reed. The pitch of the reed is not checked where you set your embouchure on the reed at the heart, but it is checked where you slide down to the string to check the pitch of the reed. We have too much flexibility out here, so you go down to here where the reed it's the hardest part of the reed. You blow nice moderate warm air, and you should get one pitch, and that pitch should be between a B and a C. I personally like it at a B, but between a B and a C, and it should be that one pitch. Then when you add pressure to your air, that one pitch should break into one other pitch, which is an octave. You don't want all sorts of crackly rattly stuff. That would be a bassoon characteristic. So one pitch, the high is the control and the focus. The low, when you add that crow, that is the flexibility and freedom. You have about 60% of the upper and 40% of the lower. So I'm going to go down to the string and blow. That gives me one pitch that's pretty much a B for me. When I add pressure, I should break into an octave that's what we would call a crow. And you just get a hint of it. Remember, it is 60-40, so it's not that your crow is going to overpower your upper note. Your crow is a slight echo. You just want the one pitch in your sound. You always check this. If the pitch of the reed is above a C, your student will play sharp. If the pitch of the reed is below a B, your student will play flat. So you always want to check the reed down to the string.
And on the bassoon reed, very similar. We want that 60-40 balance, but because the shape and the size is different, we're going to have a little bit of a different effect. So in order to crow on the bassoon reed, it's the same thing. We have too much control in the heart, which is where we would normally have our embouchure. So we're going to take that embouchure, it's going to be relaxed, and it's going to be all the way down to that first wire. So it's going to be a nice, soft lips and really warm air. And we have that crackly sound, approximately a 60-40 balance. Again, 60% on the highs and 40% on the lows. And just like Sally said, that's the highs correspond with strength and the lows correspond with flexibility. And we need to have the balance of that strength and flexibility in our reeds.
All right, so now that you have a basic understanding of how we need the reed to vibrate, then we'll move on into how to make that happen. The first reed problem we're going to talk about today is that the reed is too hard to blow. That simply means that there is too much cane all over the reed and it's not vibrating as it should. We need to do positive scraping, and we're going to use a file to do that to add vibration into the reed. Mostly the heart area into the tip is too hard. I'm going to protect the reed. I'm going to think right and left. I'm always leaning away from the spine. I'm going to lay this on here and I'm going to scrape to the right, scrape to the left, scrape to the right, scrape to the left, out to the tip. Then I'm going to check my pitch. Remember, I want to be between a B and a C. And I am a bit of a sharp C still, so I'm going to do that again. I'm going to out to the tip, protecting, lean to the left, lean to the right. leaning to the left, leaning to the right, scraping out to the tip, always away from the spine. When you're doing this, you can see I'm going to be putting and leaning left and right. There we go. Okay, so I need to add I've got my pitch down and I need to add a bit more crows. So I'm going to do that again, out to the corners this way. And there we have the octave we were looking for with the crow. The second reed problem we're going to talk about is if the reed is too hard to tongue. That simply means that either the tip is too heavy, the very tip, or that the division between the tip and the heart is not quite blended enough. You want your tip to come down to a nice point like this. You don't want it to flare back out. So once again, on a nice soaked reed, I'm going to protect the tip here, and I'm going to lean it into actually just the corner. And I'm going to draw the corner. Once again, we always think right, left. There's my left corner. I'm going to flip it. Here's my right corner. And here's my left corner. I'm going to check my pitch of my reed. And which it is a sharp B, which is great. And I'm going to tongue. Just to make sure that the articulation is good, I'm going to blend actually the heart a little bit just to open up the vibration some. Remember, that's some positive scraping. Leaning left and right, going out to the tip. I'm blending that little V that's right here, that is the top of the heart and the bottom of the tip. Oh, it tongues a lot easier now, so I have a sharp B on my pitch, and it tongues a bit easier. I can also put it like this on here because I don't want that flare out. So I'm going to get rid, and I'm not pressing down very hard. Then I'm going to flip it over. Once again, I'm putting it at an angle onto here, and I'm making sure that I do that. And it tongues better, and we're done. For our third problem, we're going to talk about the reed being too hard to control. This is the opposite of the first problem. It simply means that the reed is too free and over-vibrating. It will sound a lot like this, okay, which kind of resembles a bassoon reed, and we cannot sound like that. We need much more control over our vibration. This pitch is also quite flat. So anything around the outside of the tip, the rails in the tip itself, the corners, those are negative scraping, meaning they make the sides thinner so that the spine props up a little bit more and you have more strength in the middle, and it gives you more control over the vibration. So I'm going to lean this out to the corner itself and into the rail of the tip. I'm really angling away from the spine here. So I'm doing, and that I can also do this step again. Okay, so out in those corners, right, left, and the tip. So I have thinned all around the outside edge and put more strength down the middle. So let's see what we get. Oh, so we're getting one pitch now instead of 25. So this is a B, a little bit of a sharp B, which I like. And if I want to do that a little bit more, I will get even more control. Negative scraping around all the outside edges of the tip is very helpful in this particular step. So I have one pitch high and I break into an octave low. And now we have a reed that has a whole lot more discipline about it. All right, as a wrap up, you can see I have added some tools here to the file. These are your more expensive upper level tools, you can do so many things with just the file. That is just fine if that's what you have. If you are working with a knife and a plaque, always put the plaque carefully in between the blades, and as you're scraping, do nice little small follow through. Don't ever scrape both directions, and on your file, don't ever file back and forth. Always scrape or file one direction. Then always keep your reed nice and wet. Don't ever scrape or file on a dry reed. For your cutting block and your razor blade, if you need to shorten your reed slightly due to it's flat or the tip is too long so it's over vibrating, you put it on your cutting block and you put your razor blade right here and press straight down and clip that off so that you help raise your pitch somewhat. You can do everything, honestly, with the file that you would need to do to adjust a reed, at least to the point to help your student be playing on it and it not be so hard or out of tune. Check the pitch of the reed often, please. That B to C is so very important when it comes to your student's ability to play in tune once they put it in their oboe. Make sure that you're checking the student and the oboe itself to make sure all those things are correct, and make sure you have a nice reed for them that is going to set them up in a really good place. So, best of luck to you.
So now we're going to talk about some of the problems that we have with bassoon reeds and some possible solutions. I've also broken it down into 3 main categories. The first category is that the reed is hard to control. As you recall, we want about a 60-40 blend with the crow, and it might sound like this. If you had a reed that sounds like this, though, we hear that there are a lot of lows in that sound. Probably it's going to be flat, bright, and buzzy, especially flat on the 4th line F and 3rd space E. So there are a couple of things that we can try. The first thing is that we want to make sure that the wires are in the right places and that they're not loose. I'll have my students check with their thumb and forefinger and see if they can move the wires. If they can, then we need to tighten that wire. So we're going to pull it up. I twist my wires counterclockwise, but you might check with your reed maker. Want to make sure it's in the right position. Sometimes those wires slide down, so just double check that, and then you can fold that wire down. So let's try it again. Well, didn't get really enough better, so we're going to try the next thing. So there are different wire adjustments that you can do. This is the first wire and this is the second wire. And so if you squeeze from side to side, that's what it looks like with the pliers, and then squeezing from top to bottom looks like that. If you squeeze from side to side on the first wire or the second wire, it effectively makes the spine stronger and it builds strength into the reed. It also decreases vibration. So then if you squeeze from top to bottom on the first wire and or the second wire, it decreases the resistance and it increases the vibration. You can see that on the chart in case you forget. So the difference is that when you squeeze from side to side on the first wire, it opens the tip, and when you squeeze from side to side on the second wire, it closes the tip. And so you might keep that in mind, especially if your tip has needs to be closed or opened. Then you can sort of do 2 things all at once. So then let's see, since we squeezed from side to side on the first and second wire, let's see if that has fixed the problem. Well, the crow is still pretty low, so we're going to do the last resort, and that is clipping the tip. You can do that with a tip cutter, which is a little bit on the expensive side, or a razor blade and a cutting block. And you could also do it with the scissors for bassoon reed. And so this is a really sharp pair of scissors. This is a little unorthodox, but I am going to show you how to do this. And so what you'll do is you'll want to line it up. You're going to do about 1 millimeter and make sure you go in one motion. So here I am. I'm going to try to be as straight as possible. So I didn't take off that much, and I did a pretty good job of being straight, so you want to watch out for that. Let's try this crow now. Hey, that crow is better. So I would say that that has solved the problem. We'll definitely test that out on the instrument, but that is the information about how to adjust the reed if it's hard to control. Now we're going to explore the next problem. The reed is too hard to tongue. This is caused by there being not enough vibration, or possibly that the tip is too open or too thick. So let's make some observations about this reed. The first thing I'll do is crow the reed. We can hear that. I can only get the highs to come out, and I'm not getting the crackly sound, and that can be a problem. So that means there's less flexibility than we need. As we look at the tip opening, we can see that it's pretty open, and that's another indicator that something's wrong with the tip. So the way to solve this is that you're going to squeeze from top to bottom on the first wire, and what that'll do is it'll increase vibration, it'll decrease resistance, and it'll also close the tip up so that the air can be blown through more easily. Let's listen to the crow now. So it's a little better. It's not quite where we need it to be, but it's certainly at least getting the crow sound. So now there's another thing that we can do, and that is scrape the tip. And we can do this in a couple of different ways. The best way is by using the plaque. We're going to gently insert the plaque into there, and then we're going to take the knife and we're going to scrape, just like we did with the oboe reed, all the way to the plaque. And we're putting in what we call a thumbnail shape here. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. We're going all the way to the tip, out to the corners. So that's one thing that you can do. You can also use sandpaper, and that's another way of accomplishing essentially the same thing. And so we're going to do that with a little piece of 220 grit sandpaper. We're going to just sand that tip a little bit. We're essentially accomplishing the same thing that we did with the knife. And what we did to one side, we do to the other side. And so now, let's test that out and see if it's any better. Well, we're getting there. Now, there's one last thing that you could do, and this is a trick that is really easy to do, and I have my students do this all the time, is have that sandpaper or even an emery board here, and we're going to take and we're going to put the reed at like flat on the table here, but then we're going to lift it up very slightly, just at about a 20-degree angle. And we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're really just trying to get the very tip. So let's see if that's any better now. So that's a lot better. I can definitely hear a lot of highs, lows in the crow, a nice balance, and that will probably not be as hard to tongue now. Finally, we'll go to the last problem. This is where the reed is just too hard to blow. For this problem, usually it's that not enough vibration is happening. So we're going to make an observation about the crow first. It's just barely crowing, and it has a lot more highs than lows. So that is something for us to observe. And then we're going to look at the tip. Tip doesn't look too bad. It's about as open as I'd like. And so we've already decided that it probably doesn't need to have the tip closed down. And so we're going to try squeezing from top to bottom on the first or second wires. Now what that will do is that will actually decrease the resistance and increase vibration. So top to bottom on the first wire and top to bottom on the second wire. And we want to just watch that tip and make sure that we didn't put it in a place that we don't like. So here, now we're going to crow that reed again. We're getting a couple more lows, but it sounds like we really still need to do something to get that vibration happening. So we're going to gently insert the plaque, and we're going to use some sandpaper in the heart and in the back. So I usually like to put this over my finger, and then I'll do circles in the heart, and then I'll do circles in the back. Flip it over, same thing. Everything is more blended on a bassoon reed than it is typically on an oboe reed. You'll be able to see those parts a little better. So now I am going to crow this reed for you and see if that's any better. Wow, that is a lot better. I could definitely hear more lows in the sound, and I would expect that the vibration is happening better and that this reed is no longer quite as hard to blow as it was.
All right, since we have been talking about making this work in this format, we'd like to make a couple of video suggestions for you.
So one of the things that Sally and I did with our band director boot camps and in our private lessons is that we used a separate camera view so that we could show the students what we were doing with our tools while we were doing the adjusting on our reeds. So you can do this with a separate tripod that's very easily obtainable from a lot of different sources online. And then you can just have it showing with either the front-facing camera or the back-facing camera. On the iPhone, we found that the back-facing camera was actually a little bit better.
Zoomed in a little better, yes.
It sure did. And so it's just a little easier way of just getting an eagle-eye view. And of course in Zoom, it's really easy to have that dialed in as a separate member. And that what we do is we just, when it says join with internet audio, just say cancel. And that way you don't have the extra audio joining against it.
Feedback,
And
right.
that extra feedback. So that's one of the things that we found was really helpful, and we hope that is helpful for you too.
We have given you so much information in the last half hour that I'm sure you have a million questions, and we are more than happy to answer those for you. So we will close out this video now. We hope you have enjoyed it. We have certainly enjoyed our time with you, and we will talk to you face to face in just a second.